Well, can you tell me something about your interest in Australian, or in dance and in Australian traditional dance?
Well, my general interest in dance came from some years' association with the Borovansky Ballet, and then, as well as classical dance, I learned quite a lot about international folk dances of other countries, and from that I developed an interest in thinking, what were the dances of Australia? What did they do in earlier days? And started investigating that.
What did you find out?
Well, found out that last century in particular, dance was one of the most popular forms of recreation for all members of the population, and everyone learned to dance as a normal part of growing up, and it was a much bigger part of life than it is now. And then started going into as much as I could find in written material about that, but we were also very fortunate to get a contact in a district called Narrell in northeastern Victoria, where these traditions were still alive and well, and they still did quite a lot of the very old dances that had dropped out elsewhere. So that gave us quite a good idea. We were able to build up a picture of what the Australian dance tradition was.
What else can you tell me about these dances that we were looking at yesterday, for instance?
Well, there were sort of, in a way, two types. The folk-style dances, which were done, the earliest settlers, particularly from Great Britain, brought the dances out with them, and they were done in the early days. And then there was this new fashion of dancing, came in that century. It had a lot to do with the big social changes of the Industrial Revolution, and they had these fashions were predominantly couples dances and the sets that they called the quadrilles, and after about 1850 they really took over the social dance scene, and they were the big things that were done, big style. It was done right through up until really just after the Second World War, when they began to really go out, although modern dancing came in with ragtime, also went on at the same time. And these traditions lasted a lot longer in the bush, of course, than they did in the city.
Just tell me about that again, mate.
Right from the beginning.
No, just the business about the city versus the bush.
Well, with the new ragtime music, that introduced a new style of dancing, which we now call modern dancing, and with the new rhythms. But you did get the older style of dancing lasted in the country a lot longer, often in the form of what was called 50-50 dance, where you had a mixture of the two. But some places still did quite a few of the very old dances.
What is it about dancing that really attracts you? Why your interest? What's it about it?
Well, it's I think moving to music is a fundamental thing. I mean, you've only got to see most children, when they hear music, they'll start jigging about, and it was a very big part. I mean, we've got one of the best examples in our Aboriginal people, where dance it was very much a part of everyday life, and so that it seems to be a normal thing that human beings do.
And in terms of learning these dances, relatively easy, or?
Well, not so much the ones from last century, because as you know now, often you find young people can't do things like waltzing and the sort of dances that it's important to get the steps right. You've got to sort of move in the right direction, or you'll trip over your partner, and you have to learn that. And that was part of life last century. Either your mother or somebody in the family taught you, or even quite small little bush towns would often have someone who taught dancing and taught music too, so that it really was a big part of life then. But it has gone out of fashion a lot. And
are we missing something by not having dance as such an important part of our lives?
Well, I think we are, and because it's sort of a bit inhibiting if you're not able to get up and express yourself by moving to music and enjoying that that sort of rhythm.
Can you tell me that again, but this time start off with something like, I think, not being able to dance, or the fact that we don't have dance anymore. So you start it like a statement that I can cut.
Right. Well, today, sort of dance is a everyday part of life. Well, probably if you think back before the days of radio and the film, everybody went to the Saturday night dance, and that was, normally accepted, and that's with the first radio and films, and now television has taken over our entertainment world, whereas once the dance and music, of course, was a very big part of everybody's life, and so that it was important, and the social factor was very important. People, particularly in the bush, the dance was the thing often when you met all the neighbours. You're too busy normally with the farm work to do much socialising otherwise, but you did go to the local hops whenever they were on.
And just to backtrack right back to the start again, just tell me about your personal involvement with dance. Forget that you've already told me anything.
Right. Well, I I was some years associated with the Borovansky Ballet, and in that, as well as the classical dance, they were very strong on international folk dance. So I had a general training in the sort of dancing that people had done in other countries, and that's how I got interested in going into what Australia might have done. And I belonged to the Bush, what was then the Victorian Bush Music Club, and I started for them doing some research into what our dances were, and I went first into printed material, but it was difficult because they didn't often tell you. They just say that they had all these dances and all these accounts of what the ladies wore and what they had for supper, but they didn't always tell you exactly what they danced, and that was quite hard work to get any details of the names of the dances and how they were done. And then I was fortunate in getting this contact in Nariel, a district in northeast Victoria, where this tradition was still living and very active, and they still knew a lot of the very old dances and could do them. And so we were able to learn quite a lot from them, and then put together with what I'd found from other sources, we got quite a good picture of the Australian dance as it used to be.
Ooh. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Well, it's just that how they were revived is in the 1850s, the Bush Music Club and the other folk clubs started doing some of the dances we knew about, and we found it easier to get people to do the simple folk dances rather than the couples dances and the quadrilles, which were the main basis of dancing in the bush last century after about the 1850s. And they'd got associated these, it's really a contemporary form, what we call bush dance now. It wasn't quite it was only what they would have done in the bush in their very earliest days, done in a more contemporary form anyway, so that it's not quite the ideal name, but it's developed into a social dance form really of its own, the present sort of bush dance that we do, that's got quite popular in some circles.
Great.
And did you want to know, there were other people who were doing this research that perhaps we should mention, and there was...
Maybe if you used to start that clean, there were other people who were doing the research.
Yeah. Well, there were some other people who were doing the research. There was, in the earliest days, of John Meredith, along with his investigations of the music, did learn quite a bit about the dance, and there was Nell Challingsworth, who was interested a lot in the social aspects of it, and then later researchers include Peter Ellis, Maria and Mark Schuster, and Rob and Olya Willis, and there are others, but they've been some of the main ones. And this video, I think, is going to present some of this, of the newer work in this as a visual medium, which gives people a good idea of what it was like, and introduces people to this heritage of our Australian dance.